Now tell us about the rail gauges in Lithuania. I'd imagine that all the countries that were in the USSR. Ooh, Afghanistan's got the same gauge too. Mm-hmm. Mongolia, Japan got its own gauge.
Well, African gauge.
Oh, interesting.
What's it called? Oh, they don't have names.
Oh, it's just this is now a train podcast.
It's got a 1067 millimeters. Those are 3 feet 6 inches. That's Japan, Indonesia.
Many countries in Africa, yes. Seemingly former British colonies.
Yes.
With the exception of the DRC.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Well, no, because Kenya and Tanzania are a different gauge. Train. We love train.
Yep.
Here on The Empire Never Ended.
This one's also... It's interesting.
Why is Ecuador?
Why is Ecuador in a...
different train gauge? Train.
What do we got here? India, Pakistan, and Argentina, and Chile. Got the... is it the Iberian? No, it's the Brunel gauge. I see what's your problem. You're trying to put an old Russian standard car on a Brunel gauge. You're gonna have problems. You're gonna have a lot of problems.
I would switch out that Brunel with
Iberian.
With Iberian.
Yeah. See, I was delivering popcorn in '68, and I was part of the old Poppers Union. And kernel per kernel, you can get more over Brunel. But that's just according to an old fart like me.
What do I know?
You got some people out there, they swear by Iberian. They swear by it. But
I got stuck on a plane that was sitting on the tarmac for hours, and with this old train dude from Minnesota. He kicked ass. He just talked about fucking all the places he went on trains.
Nice.
He was like a freight for like 30 years. He'd been fucking everywhere. He knew all these things. He also knew a lot about airplanes, too.
Did he have the hat?
He did have the hat. And we were sitting for like 5 hours. Like hour 4, he was like, I'm starting to get a little ticked off now.
Nice.
Are we unpaused? We're rolling. We've been rolling because we were talking about trains. Alex, you missed us going through the world railroad gauges to see which countries what kind of gauge. This is a thing that the Empire Never Ended is now concerned with. Because in your absence, we became a train podcast.
Oh no. I'm sorry to miss that.
Transport in general.
Yeah.
I'd like to start doing more with ferries. Buses, trams too. I like ferries a lot though.
Mm-hmm.
We have some ferry plans in the future that we can maybe do on this podcast. But that's not what we're here for. Welcome back to The Empire Never Ended. It's me, Boris, and I'm here with Ray.
Hi.
And we're also joined with a very special guest tonight, our friend Alex, who is one of the editors of Antipolitika Journal, which we have talked about on the show.
We did, yeah.
Or rather, we republished the podcast, an episode of the podcast formerly known as Antifada, which is now This Wreckage.
Yeah.
Where me and Ray talked some Balkan stuff, and you talked about Antipolitika, and then we had some fun with crazy comments, YouTube deranged Balkan comments.
Mm-hmm.
But we're really happy to have you here today because we're gonna do something a little bit different today, in that we're not gonna be talking about one of our kind of usual cast of characters. Instead,
I mean, this is going to be maybe slightly different because this is going to be our more like theory heavy episode that we ever had, but it's about
Alex is shaking their head no.
that we ever had. But
I don't know. I wouldn't say, but okay, let's see.
Well, I think so. Because we are talking about some like a guy who is a theoretician. I mean, more than anything else. But it is about terrorism and has to do something with fascists as well. So it's kind of also connected to everything that we talk about.
And the years of lead will factor into this
Yes,
as well, no?
absolutely, yeah. So we're talking today about Gianfranco Sanguinetti, who is obviously an Italian guy. And he died.
I can confirm.
Yeah, he died recently. So this is the reason why we're talking about him. And also because Alex is studying the text of Gianfranco Sanguinetti for some time now already. He was a radical guy who belonged to the Situationist International. We talk a little bit about that, what it is. Was active in the radical movement of Italy since the 60s. So I don't know, maybe for the first thing, you can just tell us who Gianfranco Sanguinetti is.
Yeah. So as you said, Gianfranco Sanguinetti was famous as a member of the Situationist International. So this was I don't know if you talked about it already on the show, but it was a revolutionary group, the International Revolutionary Group that was started in France in 1957. Actually, they were founded in Italy, but mostly by French members, and they had members from I think 16 countries. So there were like sections of the International, like in Europe, in Northern Africa, and in America. They came out of like this kind of post-avant-garde milieu. The Lettrist International, they were also heavily influenced by the Surrealists.
And the Dada movement.
And the Dada movement. And politically, they were...
Michel Bernstein said, like, talking about their kind of this legacy from the avant-garde, she said something like, Michel Bernstein was one of the Situationists.
Yeah.
She said, like, we had two fathers, one that we loved, which was Dada, and one that we hated, which was Surrealism.
Mm.
Yeah.
And politically, they were council communists.
Yeah.
And their theory can be placed like in the tradition of Hegelian Marxism, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Sanguinetti was, when he became kind of well-known in Italy, he was seen a bit as a freak. Like they would describe him as this situationist or Marxist freak who is driving around in a Rolls Royce.
Damn.
So I think it makes sense to maybe talk a little bit about his background.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like why was he so rich and like where does it come from? So usually when you read something about Sanguinetti, it's usually something very short, and it says typically that his mother was a communist and his father was a rich industrialist. But the truth is that both his parents were intellectuals, partisans, and members of the Communist Party of Italy. His mother was Teresa Mattei. She was a very important figure. She was the youngest candidate of the Communist Party for the Constituent Assembly.
She also started a tradition in Italy, right?
Yes, she started the tradition of the mimosa. I don't know how you say it in English. It's this yellow flower.
Mm-hmm.
We call it mimosa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm bad with plants.
Yeah, so she introduced this as the official flower of the 8th of March. Before that, it was, I think, lilies of the valley or something, but these flowers were too expensive and not very available for like working class women. So she introduced like a flower, this mimosa, that was kind of more available to all the women. And like in 1957, she was expelled from the party for criticizing Stalinism. And Bruno Sanguinetti, his father, yes, it's important to say maybe that she also like she studied philosophy, so she was also like an intellectual. And his father, Bruno Sanguinetti, so also a member of the Communist Party, both of them, so both of his parents were involved in the assassination of Giovanni Gentile in 1944. So he was a minister during fascism and like a philosopher. So they were both involved in this assassination. His father, also intellectual, but he also inherited this food industry, Arrigoni, from his father, who established this industry apparently thanks to the help of Mussolini.
Oh, wow.
So they became a very rich family. They even had a factory in Istria, which is where I come from. So between the two wars, Istria was a part of Italy, and then after the war, the communists took the factory from them. But they still remained very rich regardless. And yeah, maybe it's kind of interesting to say that he was born out of marriage. So his father was previously married, and at that point, so he was born in 1948 in Switzerland. At that point, divorce was still illegal in Italy.
Mhm.
So they had to go abroad for him to get born, and then they had to smuggle it somehow into Italy, and then they had also some trouble with legalizing him basically because he was like born out of marriage.
Damn, so even rich people weren't exempt from that kind of stuff, huh?
Apparently, they had connections, so they managed somehow to legalize him. But yeah, they had
Crazy.
they had some adventures in this whole thing of getting the child and register him. And his father died 2 years after he was born, so 1950. And because Bruno Sanguinetti was one of the major, how do you say, financiers
Yeah.
of the Communist Party of Italy, Gianfranco suspected later in his life that he might have been killed by the CIA.
Oh.
It was just something that he mentioned in a letter, that he died of a heart attack, but he thought that maybe he was poisoned.
Yeah, just
by the
to
CIA.
interrupt for a second, because Gianfranco Sanguinetti's papers are now at the Beinecke Library of the Yale University in New Haven,
Exactly.
which you spent some months there going through his papers, so you read most of the stuff, or at least made copies.
Yes, I recently came back from the archive. I still didn't read everything because it's a lot of material.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I read a lot of his correspondence.
How did it end up in Yale? Do you,
So he met 2013. He met with a professor from Yale, Professor Kevin Repp, who is like a situationist enthusiast, and he persuaded him to sell his archive to Yale, to the Beinecke. And he also acquired the archive of Mustafa Kayati and also other people. Yeah, they met in Prague, where Sanguinetti lived in the last couple of decades of his life. And then they were also like hanging out in Italy and became very good friends. So after Gianfranco died, I met with Professor Repp and asked some of the questions that I unfortunately didn't manage to ask Gianfranco, because we came into contact in this spring, and we exchanged a couple of emails, but there were still things that I wanted to ask him, but unfortunately he died at the beginning of October.
Damn, yeah.
Yeah. So he was, since a child, like surrounded by different intellectuals. He grew up in a villa, so very, very rich. As a teenager, he was already like very very theoretically well-grounded and politically active. I found his essays from the gymnasium where he wrote about things like the abolition of the family. He quoted Horkheimer and Adorno and other writers of the Frankfurt School. So, for example, about Debord, it is very, like, famously people are always asking, was Debord aware of the Frankfurt School? Did he actually read Adorno and Günther Anders and others? And probably he didn't, but Sanguinetti did. He was, like, since a teenager, very aware of the Frankfurt School.
I mean, that's impressive for a high school student.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I read some of these essays and they are really, really impressive.
Wow.
That he wrote when he was like 15, 16. So as a teenager, he was active in the like anti-militarist youth movement, in the group Onda Verde. And there was also this magazine Mondo Beat. So it was a kind of hippie youth culture. They were so mostly about the abolition of compulsory military service, right to abortion, LGBT rights, and these kind of topics. Already when he was a teenager, he was arrested once, and this was when it was a protest. I don't know what exactly happened, but he raised the flag of the Spanish Republic of 1936 in front of like Francoist minister that lived in Milan. And he was arrested on the orders of the Milanese police chief Luigi Calabresi, who is famous for like, participating in the
investigation
of the bombing at Piazza Fontana, and who was famously killed in 1972 because
He's the character in the movie that we watched.
Yes.
Yeah. He's the cop in
Yes.
the movie.
he was investigating this bombing, and he got killed because by a member of Lotta Continua who suspected that he was responsible for the killing of Pino Pinelli. We will talk about this maybe later.
Did we talk about that? That's the who's defenestrated, right?
Pino Pinelli was defenestrated.
Pino Pinelli, yeah.
Yeah. So he was arrested on the orders of Luigi Galvez.
Sanguinetti was.
Yeah, Sanguinetti.
I mean, not connected to the Pinelli thing. It's just an
absolutely not connected, but it's just like
fun fact.
Fun fact, because Luigi Calabrese is like a famous character.
Yeah.
He started to consider himself a situationist when he was 16, after he saw a television program about the text "The Misery of Student Life" by Mustafa Kayati. I thought it was interesting that there was like a television program
I was about to
about
say,
this text.
What TV shows were talking about?
I guess Rai, but I'm not sure.
Wow, okay. Different times, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you think, does it make sense to real quick just mention who Mustafa Kayati is?
He was a member of the French section, but he was Tunisian?
I think so.
Yeah.
No, I think Tunisian.
Tunisian? The Misery of Student Life is, as far as I know, his only famous text.
Yeah.
That's a pretty famous one, though.
Yeah. He left the Situationist International in 1969, so during the conference in Venice, to join the struggle in Palestine. Yeah. I don't know
He joined, I think, PFLP or...
I think so, yes. I'm not completely sure, but I think it
spent
was
only a brief time there.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't capable to start a situationist faction of the group. Yeah.
Exactly. That was his intention? Or?
Well, not literally situationist, but like, I mean, they were like very kind of anti-Leninist council communists.
Right. That's why I was kind of interested.
Yes,
I just wanted to mention him because he has kind of an interesting history there.
Yeah.
He was very disappointed.
Yeah.
And Guy Debord kind of told him, I told you so. Okay. And so in 1967, he, together with a group of friends from high school, Sanguinetti, right? So with Marco Maria Siggiani, Claudio Pavan, and Paolo Salvadori, started a magazine. Like it was a situationist-inspired magazine called S. They had this professor Carlo Oliva as the editor because they were like still very young. So this was not an official situationist magazine, but it was like situationist-inspired. And this group met in 1968 for the first time with the French situationists. So in 1968, they, for the first time, established contact with the actual situationists.
Mm-hmm. So this is when he is now already for several years, because he was born in 48, right? So he would have been
so now
20
he's 20.
and 68.
Yeah.
He's been kind of identifying with the situationists for a while, but now he's finally connected with the rest of like the big shots.
Yes.
Right?
So he like came in contact with them when he was 20.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you mentioned Guy Debord. I mean, he's usually the name connected when the situationists come up with the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now he was kind of the main writer and theoretician of the group, although there are now some other theories, maybe that Guy Debord kind of suppressed the contributions by other situationists, including the mentioned Michel Bernstein, and there are differing opinions of that. I think that Sanguinetti also had some opinions on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the end thought maybe that was true. But so usually also when people talk about the situation, it's usually this concept of the spectacle is mentioned. So this concept of the spectacle is kind of very abstract. I know it's a bit difficult question. There's like PhDs written about what the spectacle is.
Mm-hmm.
Because Guy Debord is kind of a very interesting thinker, but a kind of a thinker that you kind of need another book that tells you what he said in his book. But it's also important because the things that Sanguinetti wrote about are also connected to this concept. So maybe it would be good if you could try to explain us what the spectacle is.
Sure. So this concept was developed in his book, the most famous book of the Situationist International, The Society of the Spectacle, which was published in 1967.
The book by Guy Debord.
By Guy Debord, exactly. So Debord, in this book, defines the spectacle as a social relation among people mediated by images, which is kind of very vague. He also said that like in societies where like the capitalist mode of production is dominant, life presents itself as an immense collection of spectacles, and everything that is directly lived moves away into representations. So you see like here that he uses this word image, representation. So it's not a surprise that like hundreds of books that were written about the Situationist International and the Society of the Spectacle had like an emphasis on like postmodern theory and media theory. There were a lot about like commercial images and these sort of things. However, there are a couple of books which I would recommend that link the concept of the spectacle to the like value form. So the principle of commodity exchange. Like the first good book that I would recommend is the book by Anselm Jappe called Debord. So it's an intellectual biography. So he was the first one to link the concept of the spectacle with Marxist critique of the fetishistic character of commodities and with the theory of reification of George Lukács. The book came out, I think, in 1993, so when Debord was still alive, and he approved very much of this book. Another good book that I would recommend is by Tom Bunyard. It's called Debord, Time and Spectacle. And Bunyard has like a much broader view on the concept of the spectacle. He thinks that reducing this concept to just capitalist societies is reductive, and that the spectacle should be seen like as a condition where human subjects are detached from their like own individual and collective power. So it's a kind of condition where people are like detached of their own agency and their own collective power, and also like historical agency. I think this view is a little bit maybe too broad, but also I would definitely say that this, like how he defines it, definitely is an aspect of the concept of the spectacle, but just one aspect. In my opinion, the best book is by Eric John Russell. The book is called Spectacular Logic in Hegel and Debord, Why Everything is as It Seems. He does connect the concept of the spectacle. So unlike Bunyard, who has this more like maybe a historical view, Russell specifically connects the concept of the spectacle with the logic of commensurability, historically grounded within the principle of commodity exchange. So with like the logic of the value form. So how would I maybe explain, like in simple terms, what the spectacle is? I will maybe not give a definition, but I would like how would I, in my words, say what is it about? So I think what is important is that in Debord's theory, capitalism is not viewed only as a mode of production, but a social relation. And the concept of the spectacle is, I think, about how power and social domination works in capitalist society. So it doesn't work only like from the top down. I mean, also like this, but not only. It also works in a very diffused way. And the concept of the spectacle is also about how, so the principle of commodity exchange or the value form, like how these principles affect all other aspects of life under capitalism. So not just production, but also the so-called free time, everyday life, urbanism, architecture, everything basically. So how this logic is reflected into all these areas, but also how all of these aspects support back like the logic of the value form. So this is maybe how would I try to explain it, but as you said, is a very complicated concept and there are hundreds of books about it. So I think people should just try to understand it themselves.
Yeah, we can put some links in this app too for some books. There's also, I will say, a glasses store in LA called the Society of the Spectacle.
Cool. So, okay, but at least tell us, I think that Debord kind of differentiates at least 2 or 3 different kinds of spectacle, right? So maybe you can tell us something about that.
Yeah, so in the Society of the Spectacle, he distinguishes between the concentrated and the diffuse spectacle. So in the concentrated spectacle, social cohesion is achieved through like centralized state power, continuous police violence, and through the figure of a like leader. Whereas in the diffused spectacle, social cohesion is achieved through consumerism, and it's organized around this image of like abundance of commodities. Of course, these are just ideal types. It's not that one society is exclusively concentrated spectacle and one is diffused. But these are just like ideal types. And then in the comments on the Society of the Spectacle, which he published in 1988, he comes up with the concept of the integrated spectacle, which is a kind of combination of the two. He wrote in the comments that this kind of spectacle, this kind of society appears in the 70s in countries such as Italy and in several countries of Latin America. And like some of the characteristics of this kind of society, so there is a combination of like neoliberal economy, new technologies of communication and surveillance, informal tracker economies, and like an intense state repression and police violence.
Okay. And so what did young Sanguinetti do when he joined the Situationists? What did he do with them?
So there was, the first thing that they did, there was an attempt to establish like a Italian section.
Mm-hmm.
So because the Situationists International had like national sections.
This is, by the way, a small group.
This is
like in the 20 or something years of their history, they had something like 70 members, I think.
Wow.
altogether, yes.
Yeah, so like
But not all at the same time.
No. So like I don't know. Like in Paris, there was like 4 of them or something. I mean,
A bit more, but
yeah.
I always somehow thought it was larger, because
No.
it's one of those things you hear
Yeah.
about. And you kind of have this idea that it's, I don't know, that there was kind of a more.
No, because there were
there was a big fluctuation.
Yeah. There was also many more people who like were kind of pro-situationist or pro-situ. So many like other groups that looked up to them and like kind of adopted their theory, but situationists often looked down on the pro-situs. So I mean, in the North America, there was only like the American section of the Situationist International had 4 members.
Wow. Okay.
But there were many, like especially in California, there were many like these pro-situationist groups. Yeah.
Yeah, the Italian section also had maximum 4.
Yeah.
So in January 1969, the 3 of them, so Sanguinetti, Salvadori, and Pavan, met with philosopher Mario Perniola with the intention of forming the Italian section. And then while Perniola was here, they had a kind of organizational debate about how the Situationist International should be organized. And Debord didn't like what Mario Perniola suggested. So at some point he called him the main enemy of the SI in Italy. And he also said that Mario Perniola didn't understand Hegel properly.
Oh.
I don't know what exactly about, but very, very bad.
I mean, the Situationist International is infamous for the exclusions.
Yeah, exactly.
Like even of people who were never members, they were excluded. Like, I mean, all of the members in the end were excluded except Sanguinetti and Debord. I think there was
one more.
There was one more forgotten guy,
Some Danish
in Denmark, who they forgot to exclude. But and then Sanguinetti and Debord abolished in '72. They like shut down the international. There were only 2 members at that point. So they also like there was this group that there are now many books about the anarchist group from New York City, Up Against the Wall motherfuckers. They had a connection with the British section of the International, were good friends with them and kind of influenced the British Situationists. But then when Raoul Vaneigem, the other famous theoretician of the Situationist International, traveled to New York City to meet them, he got completely scandalized because the motherfuckers had a friend who was into like some spiritual stuff or something like that. And then the French were hated, all that kind of stuff. And then they decided, like, because there was some idea that maybe the motherfuckers would become the American section of the International, which would be very interesting because they were very different. I mean,
yeah, I was about to say that.
Yeah.
From what I know about the motherfuckers is quite different from this like kind of high French philosophy stuff.
I mean, there are obvious similarities because
Yeah.
like they also come out of this kind of Dada surrealist influence, but they were like very militant anarchists, like
Right.
who were about like they were called street gang with an analysis. So they were like kind of the opposite of the Situationists in that sense. But then they were like intensely hated from that moment by the Situationists for allegedly for this reason, that they have a friend who is like into spiritual ideas.
And the boy wrote a letter to
Ben
Morea
Morea.
where he says something like "I shit on you" or
Yes,
something.
a very French.
A very French insult.
It's just like a
One sentence.
one sentence, like you, and then a series of Cretan idiot. I shit on you. We shit on you. Something like this.
All four of us in France.
Yes. And so there is this kind of joke that like Ben Morea was excluded, although he was never even a member of the Situationist International. So it's that kind of a group.
Ben Morea being the guy, one of the guys from
From the
Against Wall
Motherfuckers,
motherfuckers.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when they decided to not be friends with Perniola, he went on to form the group Lud, which was part of a tendency
This is Perniola. Yeah.
Perniola, yes, that is referred to as Critica Radicale. And except Lud, in this tendency, there is also the group Comontismo, Circolo Rosa Luxemburg, and others.
I mean, this
So
is a
from-
whole Italian kind of section of the radical movement called Critica Radicale.
As I said,
Yeah, but who were like they were the like Italian like pro-situationists, let's say, in some sense, but like very militant. They were kind of a combination of the situationists and the motherfuckers.
the Situationists called them hippie Maoists.
Okay.
And they called the Situationists something like they wanted to insult them by calling them like that they're still operaists
Mhm.
because they were stuck on the idea of the proletariat and things like this.
Yeah.
So yes, they got rid of Perniola. So from March 1969, there were like 3 members: Sanguinetti, Salvador, and Pavan. And then at some point later, they were joined by the Venezuelan Eduardo Rote, who was actually the only Latin American member of the SI. In July of that year, they published the only issue of their journal, so Internazionale Situationista. And about this journal, Debord says that this is the best thing written in Italy since Machiavelli.
Okay, bold statement.
Yeah. Then one important moment during their history, their short history of this section, was the Venice conference that Sanguinetti organized in September in Venice. He obviously organized it because he had a lot of money and he bought a lot of wine. He was actually a wine producer, maybe not at that moment already, but later he became a wine producer. So he bought a lot of wine. He rented a really nice place. However, the conference was like heavily surrounded by informers and like watched by police informers. And later, in a text that Debord and Sanguinetti wrote about the like kind of the history of the SI, they commented that a decline of the Situationist International was already visible, like in the dynamic that was happening on this conference. The Italian section slowly dissolved already in 1971, so all the members were just being excluded one by one. And then when Gianfranco was the only left, he joined the French section. And as Ray said, he was there until the end. Like him and Debord and this one forgotten Danish guy were the only one who were left. And him and Debord signed this last text, thesis on the Situationist International and its time. And he remained a very close friend with Debord until 1979, when they parted over a book that Sanguinetti was writing, where Debord did not agree with part of his analysis, or actually he wanted Gianfranco to publish it right away, but Gianfranco he didn't want. And so there was a split over this book.
Yeah, the high point of the Situationist International was 68, and then after that, they were kind of in decline until 72, I would say. The book that you mentioned, Sanguinetti wrote, is The Truthful Report on the Last Chances to Save Capitalism in Italy. So it's a book that he wrote under using a pseudonym. It's a kind of also it's kind of a satirical prank aspect to that whole book, and it produced a scandal, which I guess was the purpose of the book. So maybe you can tell us something about that.
Yeah, so the full title of this pamphlet, as he called it, is The Truthful Report on the Last Chances to Save Capitalism in Italy. He wrote it like in the voice of kind of very cultured, very influential bourgeois. And like the form of the pamphlet was like to give advice to the real Italian bourgeoisie on how to save capitalism in this context of like social turmoil and riots and so on. And this was kind of an interesting story, like the whole context of how it was published. It was kind of a scandal even before it came out, because I think in March, so it came out in 1975, when Sanguinetti was 27, I guess. So already in March of this year, Sanguinetti was arrested in Florence on the basis of some machine gun bullets that were found, that were actually planted in his car. And him and his friend and his girlfriend went to prison. Thanks to a very capable lawyer, he got out after 8 days. But what was interesting is that when they were arrested, they were on the way to give the manuscript of the Truthful Report like to the printer, to the publisher. And the manuscript went unnoticed in and out of the female prison because it was hidden in the like violin case of his partner, Catherine Scott. And then, so how he decided like to publish it, he like had this, I think he was maybe also his cousin or something, Sergio Scotti Camuzzi was the publisher. This was his very first project. He produced 520 luxurious copies of this pamphlet and delivered them like to specific people. So some of them had like a dedication, some didn't. So to famous politicians, industrialists, journalists, and so on. The list of like the addresses were provided by his very close friend, the lawyer Roberto Mignoli. He was a lawyer and a kind of a father figure to Sanguinetti. Like they corresponded throughout like all of these decades until the death of Mignoli. At some point, when he started having bad relations with Debord, one of the aspects of like why their friendship broke was because Debord suspected Mignoli to being an informant, and this was like Gianfranco didn't take it very, very well because Mignoli was a very important friend of him. So Mignoli was one of the models after whom Gianfranco based this character of Censor, and he also provided these addresses. And so when he sent these copies to all these famous people, the book immediately became like a huge success. There were dozens of articles about this book. Everybody was speculating who wrote it. They had specific ideas. It could be this character, it could be that character. And everybody took it like as an authentic thing. Like everybody took it. Yeah, this is.
So they didn't think it was satire.
No, there was only one. There was only one journalist. I forgot his name, but he says, I think this is actually written by some leftist student of humanities, because all of these like quotes and name dropping sounds a bit like the pretentious work of like a student of humanities. But this was only one person, like only one journalist. Everybody else was like, no, this is some very, very important things.
Some very serious guy.
This is very serious. We need to take it very, very seriously. I think there were like 5 or 6 ideas of who it might be. And what Gianfranco wrote later in another book, that it was shocking to him that what was the scandal of this book was not so much the content of what he wrote, but the fact that an anonymous person close to power dared to publish these things. So maybe when we will speak about the context, you will understand what was controversial about it, but it was never discussed so much in the public what exactly he said. I mean, it was a little bit, but not so much. It was much more discussed, like who is he, like about his identity. And this prank was like, I don't know, very famous, and it became like the model for many other pranks. Already in 1977, there was a similar thing that happened where also like a radical left writer, Gianfranco Sanguinetti, published a book called Letters to the Heretics, and it made it appear as it was written by Enrico Berlinguer, so the secretary of the Communist Party of Italy, and as it was published by the publishing house Einaudi. So this also made a big scandal. And Gianfranco actually helped Ghisleni directly in this operation. And I recently learned from an article from the Brooklyn Rail that came out like after Gianfranco died, that the American group Yes Men was also inspired by the Chancellor scandal, and apparently some of their members met with Gianfranco several times.
Yeah, I think this tradition kind of was continued by the radicals in Italy. There is this group of like a collective of fiction writers from Italy that first wrote novels under the name Luther Blissett and then Wu Ming. They were also involved in pranks like that. I think they made a fake book by the American anarchist Hakim Bey, and they put like texts by Stalin and Mussolini inside and things like that. And people took it seriously and wrote very positive reviews. So people do continue doing things like that.
Yes, I forgot to say that. So when he mailed these books, he received a letter of thanks from like many people, including like Aldo Moro or the Minister of Labor, Carlo Donat Cattin, and many other like famous people. I saw these letters, and it's kind of bizarre.
Yeah. So what was the actual thesis of the text?
Okay, so the kind of the point of the book is to give advice to the Italian bourgeoisie of how to save capitalism. And I would say the central advice that he gives is that the best allies for the bourgeoisie to save capitalism are the communists, so the Communist Party of Italy, and the unions.
By the way, at the time, the radical movement in Italy didn't think that the communists were an actual leftist, like revolutionary party. The radicals in Italy saw the Communist Party as a kind of centrist, almost like part of the capitalist system kind of party.
So the PCE should be installed into government, and the state should use way more unionists than carabinieri, like in order to suppress the riots. This was like kind of the central thesis. I think it's interesting maybe to compare his approach to like one of the foundational theoreticians of operaismo, Mario Tronti, who had this idea that capitalists formed as a class in reaction to the working class already been formed as a class, constituted as a class. And Sanguinetti had like kind of the absolute opposite idea. And by the way, I don't think that this is, because this is kind of an ironical pamphlet, I don't think that this is a ironical version of what he actually thinks. I think this is what he actually means. So he said that the bourgeois class had the merit of, in a way, inventing class and the class struggle, and was the first one to like start like a class war. And it was capitalism that continuously reshaped the class composition of societies where it ruled. And he had like a very... so he chose basically this form of the pamphlet based on the kind of literary works and like political works that were written like in the 16th until the 18th century, when the bourgeois class was a young and strong and revolutionary class. So this was kind of his model. But the idea in the Truthful Report was that at that moment in Italy, the bourgeois class is in decline and is losing like losing the reins of the society. And the working class is coming now to the fore as this revolutionary class. He thought that the Italian industrialists and generally those who like have economic power had been too loyal to their ideology of laissez-faire, and they thought that one should not interfere with the delicate laws, internal laws of the economy. But they, as he says, cheerfully forgot like the very society in which these laws operate. And And he also thought that the political class and the middle class were giving too much importance to like individual capitals at the expense of capitalism as a social relation. So basically, we could say that his view of the state was that the state should be like a kind of like ideal collective capitalism, so that the state should ensure like the social requirements for the extraction of surplus value to function. Like a model for Italy that he recommended was the Venetian Republic. He said that the bourgeoisie in Italy should rule thanks to what he calls terrorismo moderato della felicità, the moderate terrorism of happiness. So a society where everybody's happy in their place, everybody has like a good wage, the state ensure that there is good food, that there is not too much pollution, that there is a lot of political choices from which people can choose. There is a variety of questions about which people vote. None of these questions are related to any foundational elements of the society, but there is a lot of them, and people have this. There is this appearance that people have a direct relation to power, and everybody's happy in their place. However, he did not come up with one-size-fits-all rule about how to save capitalism. This was his advice for Italy. But for example, he mentions that in other places of the world, it is more convenient to have like a straight-up like imperialist war. So in some places, we should have something like the Venetian Republic, some kind of democracy. In other places, war. So I think this is important. I mean, of course, this particular pamphlet is about Italy, but it's important to say that he had like different visions about how capitalism can be saved depending on the context.
How do you think did his background as coming from like a both industrialist and communist family kind of put him in a very particularly unique place to be able to speak to these kind of people? Like, do you think he like understood this kind of mentality of this Italian bourgeoisie and industrialists better than probably most other people in the movement or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was, so except from his friend Roberto Mignoli, who was a lawyer, he was also friends with several Italian bankers who were kind of like the same type of person as Roberto Mignoli. So they were all like not only very rich, but also very cultured. Mm-hmm. Like when I was reading the letters between him and these bankers and Mignoli the lawyer, it was always about literature and philosophy. Mm-hmm. So he had access like to originals of Renaissance literature, and he was discussing with them mostly these kind of things.
So his family wasn't kind of ostracized from that world because of their background or anything. They were just full on, just regular.
It appears, no.
Interesting.
So Sanguinetti didn't publish many texts, especially not many books. His other well-known book that is kind of connected to this, his usage of also kind of situationist points in analyzing capitalism, is a small book called Terrorism in the State, right?
On Terrorism in the State, yes.
On Terrorism in the State. So can you tell us more about Sanguinetti's specific view of terrorism, especially in the context of the years of lead in Italy?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So this book was published in April 1979. It was actually a chapter of a much larger book called Rimedio Tutto, A Remedy for Everything. This book is in the Beinecke, this manuscript is in the Beinecke library. There's a whole thing of why was this not published. We can maybe talk about this later.
Yeah, it was never published, only this chapter, right?
Only this chapter was published, yes. So his view on terrorism, you ask. Probably the main point, which he already made also in the Truthful Report, but he elaborates much more on this in this particular book, is that many terrorist attacks and bombings that happened throughout the years of lead in Italy were in fact false flag action orchestrated by the intelligence services. And when he talks about specific things. He never said that every terrorist attack was orchestrated by the secret services, but
When did he write this? Sorry.
It was published in 1979.
Okay.
But some of them are probably orchestrated by the intelligence services. So at that time when he wrote this, and this was the thing that was scandalous and controversial about the Truthful Report, because he wrote that the bombing of Piazza Fontana that happened in 1969 in Milan was organized by the secret services, but nobody ever, when this whole scandal broke out, commented on these specific things. Like, it was not scandalous for them that the state could kill 17 people, but it was scandalous for them that somebody close to power who knew this would say it, like would publicly say it.
So this thesis was already present in the Truthful Report.
Yes, but here he elaborates because the Truthful Report is not about terrorism. This was just something that he says, but he doesn't elaborate so much.
Also, this is important to say that this was much before anyone knew that something like Gladio existed. So it was like a pretty unique point of view.
Yes, I will come to this quickly. So when he published on terrorism in the state, practically everybody believed that these were just like conspiracy theories. And later, when a lot of these documents, much later, when a lot of these documents were declassified, it was confirmed that indeed a lot of the things that he said were actually right.
And when were these documents declassified? In the 90s, right? Or something like that?
In the 90s and also later. For example, about Aldo Moro, there was some kind of parliamentary investigation, I think, in the 2000s already, later, much later. So, as already said before a little bit, he thought, so for him, the fact that the state used this kind of false flag terrorist attack was a sign of weakness of the Italian bourgeoisie. And it kind of, so for example, the bombings of Piazza Fontana, he says that they represented like an immediate relief for the state institutions, like it kind of saved the state, but at the same time it became the source of all future mistakes, because they started using this, at least he says this, that they started using this tactic too often, and that it basically became like the source of all mistakes of the state.
Today there is a consensus that people kind of all agree that behind the Piazza Fontana bombings were fascists who were working for the state, and then blamed the anarchists for it.
Yes.
We have a couple episodes where we talk a little bit about the Piazza Fontana bombing, so we can put some links if you need a refreshing, just so we don't have to go through it again.
Yep.
Yeah, it was people connected to the group Ordine Nuovo, the far-right group Ordine Nuovo. But the Italian military secret services messed with the investigation and were basically I'm missing the word. Were covering the perpetrators. Were trying to protect the perpetrators. So he uses at some point in the Truthful Report, he used this term, this phrase. He says that the false flag terrorism became a gladium ancipitem in manus stulti, which means like a two-edged sword in the hands of a fool. And in one manuscript, like in one version of the Truthful Report, he underlined this phrase and wrote that this word gladium probably communicated to those in power that he might actually be one of them, because they might have understood it as a reference to Gladio.
Yeah,
interesting.
But he used it. He didn't know anything about Gladio.
He didn't know anything specifically.
Yeah,
right.
He wrote. So he was constantly questioned. His house was constantly searched. His phone was tapped because, like, the police thought that he actually had some information. But he was constantly saying, "No, I don't have any actual information. I'm saying this like as a historian, as a theoretician of the capitalist society, and because I know how like the states operate." And so this is just based, like his theses were just based on theoretical knowledge and not because he specifically knew what happened.
Can you imagine like the panic in one of these offices? They're like, how the fuck did he know that word? Where did he pull that from?
Yeah.
pull his file. Did he talk to somebody?
Yeah.
Crazy.
So how does this view of terrorism connect with the whole theory of the spectacle?
So Sanguinetti says that, I mean, he has a couple of like very general ideas about it, and then also some more specific. One general thesis that he says, which I think is still important, is that terrorism is like an everyday part of life in the society of the spectacle. So in a society that is ruled by the commodity. So terrorism is in not just in the sphere of labor, it's also in the sphere of so-called free time, in the commercials, in the pollution, in the necessity to have money and to provide it, and all the aspects of life under capitalism. More specifically, he says that like terrorism and like actions of intelligence services were always part of the state, like in general. So the way that order is kept was always covered by some kind of like military secrecy. And specifically also the modern state was always, like modern states were always terrorist right at their beginning and then towards their end. He quotes a number of like historical statehood and military theorists such as Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, Giugiardini, Karl von Clausewitz, and like to give examples when some kind of deception was used to impose control. However, like how would I frame this idea of how he connects terrorism to the concept of the spectacle? So I would say that for him, false flag terrorism and like other operations of intelligence services, fake news and the like, are only an addition to a more fundamental deception. And so what is this more fundamental deception? Basically, it's the spectacle. In this context, he doesn't use this word, but this is what basically it is. He uses a phrase, social organization of generalized lies, which I think is kind of interesting. So I would go back to what we were saying before. So because this more fundamental deception is basically the spectacle, which is a concept by Debord. But there are some differences some small differences between how Sanguinetti operates with this concept. So remember before when we were talking about the distinction between the diffuse and the concentrated spectacle, and then when Debord comes up with the idea of the integrated spectacle in the comments on the society of the spectacle. So I would say that his concept of the integrated spectacle was highly influenced by Sanguinetti's writings. So for Debord, this was a type of society that appeared in the 70s in societies such as Italy. And for him, like the way he describes it is that the integrated spectacle represents like an unprecedented unity between capitalist economy and the modern state, and like also specific unity between essence and appearance. However, for Sanguinetti, this kind of society did not appear in the 70s, but rather these are characteristics of the spectacle since the beginning. So of the characteristics of the rule of the bourgeoisie since the French Revolution. Another difference, I mean, it's not necessarily a difference, but Sanguinetti, unlike Debord, when he talks about the spectacle or this, how he calls it, the social organization of generalized lies, that he puts much more emphasis on the state. So how does the state reproduce this deception that, in his opinion, is at the root of capitalist society? There is, like, we are all familiar with this one kind of fundamental deception, which is facilitated by the like bourgeois form of law. So we know that in order for capitalism to like exist and to develop, the workers need to behave as they need to behave collectively as commodity owners, so as the owners of their labor power as a commodity. And in order for this to function, the conflict between labor and capital needs to be established by the state in the form of a conflict between right against right. So the right of the workers to sell their labor power and the right of the capitalists to buy their labor power. So this is like a kind of conflict that is intrinsic to monetary relations. One side winning over the other does not lead to something beyond capitalism. And this, like how the bourgeois form of law, what the bourgeois form of law makes possible is to make this contract appear as it is done between individuals who are formally free and equal. While we obviously know that people who are forced to sell their labor power are not at all free nor equal to the ones who can buy their labor power.
Right.
And this is something that Marx explains, and then Pashukanis also elaborates. This is something that we are kind of all familiar. But what Sanguinetti adds to this kind of basic deception that is part of capitalist society, he talks about the practice of journalism and parliamentary representation of citizens that started to be used by the bourgeoisie since the French Revolution as practices that reinforce this kind of deception. So journalism gives everybody the appearance that everything is transparent and verifiable and so on. And parliamentary representation gives everybody the appearance that they're in a direct communication with power. And as Debord elaborated in the Society of the Spectacle, and Gianfranco elaborates this here even more, representation, any kind of representation, always plays the game of power in a way, because representative will never challenge the basic structure inside of which they operate. So they will always channel any kind of dissent into demands and policies that do not challenge this basic structure. Another aspect of this social organization of appearances is the appearance of separation between different aspects of this society. I think here, a concept that is useful from the book that we mentioned before, so the book by Eric John Russell, so how he explains the logic of the spectacle, he uses the term unity in separation. So he thinks that because Guy Debord says that separation is kind of the alpha and the omega of the society of the spectacle, but Russell believes that this logic should be supplemented by this idea of unity in separation. And I think this is useful to understand Gianfranco's concept, because Gianfranco speaks about this appearance of the separation between the economy and the state. So it's just an appearance. It's not an actual separation. The appearance of the separation between left and right inside of a nation state, or the appearance of the separation between democratic or authoritarian regimes. And in his opinion, this is also one of these fundamental deceptions of the society of the spectacle that also serve to channel revolt into a form that doesn't challenge the state and the value form. Mm-hmm. So for him, to summarize, when this basic deception fails, this is when the state needs to use this false flag terrorism, fake news, and such.
Mm-hmm. Spectacular acts of violence.
Exactly.
Okay, so we mentioned the years of lead a few times, but didn't actually define what that is. I guess most people know, but that kind of term refers to a period in modern Italian history, 60s, 70s. What is usually the time frame that defines?
Late 60s until late 80s.
Late 80s. Okay. The period of intense political violence in Italy, coming both from the left radical and also fascist groups, with the also big role of the Italian state that was completely obscured up to a certain point and then uncovered, but not completely. So it's and of course all of this was happening in the context of the Cold War, of course. So one of the kind of one of the key moments of the years of lead in Italy was the Piazza Fontana bombing, I don't know if you want to tell us more about how Sanguinetti viewed that event.
Yeah, so we already mentioned the Piazza Fontana. So just to like a quick reminder, so this was like a bombing that happened on December 12th, 1969. So a bomb was detonated in the agricultural bank and it killed 17 people. And these two anarchists, as we also already mentioned, were accused, Pietro Valpreda and Pilo Pinelli. Pilo Pinelli was famously thrown out of the window during the interrogation. And then there was the famous...
There's a whole play by Dario for Accidental Death of an Anarchist about
exactly,
that event.
And the famous song, La Ballata del Pino Pinelli. One of the authors of this song, Gio Falisi, was actually a good friend of Gianfranco. So as we also already mentioned, this bombing was done by members of the far-right group Ordine Nuovo, and the intelligence service, the military intelligence services were involved in obstructing the investigation and covering the evidence and protecting the perpetrators. This was confirmed, obviously, much later. So already, as soon as 7 days, I think, 7 days after the bombing, the Italian section already published a text in which they denounced the bombing as a false flag that was aimed against the Italian proletariat. So they published a text under the title, Is the Reichstag Burning? And also in January the next year, the group Lud of Mario Preniola also published a text, Bombe Sangue Capitale, in which they also had a similar thesis. So they already then view the bombing in the context of the intense worker struggles that were happening at the time in Italy. Like something that happened before that kind of started, in their opinion, like rolling these events was an attempt by the unions to like channel the revolts by calling like a day of national strike over the question of rent on the 19th of November. And the workers did not accept this idea. The union leaders were ridiculed, and in Milan, the workers started like a 3-day riot that were directed barricades, and basically both the police and the unions were completely unable to impose any kind of control. And for the Situationist, like this context was why the Italian state decided to use this false flag operation. So they made this thesis in this text, Is the Reichstag Burning? And then in the Rapporto Veridico and in the Terrorism and the State, he basically elaborates on this thesis. Again, he said that this tactic for the state was in that moment, very useful, but then it became like used excessively, and it led like to a weakening of the Italian state.
I mean, I guess you can't just keep bombing every time or letting people bomb stuff every time something gets a little out of hand. It becomes normalized at a certain point now.
Yeah, exactly.
Like mass shootings in the U.S.
Already Machiavelli apparently warned against the misuse of such tactics. He quotes like Machiavelli very, very extensively. He also wrote that, so he wrote this on Terrorism and the State, that by accusing anarchists specifically for this bombing, the state was basically attacking the whole proletariat because of their anarchic way of organizing. So without leaders, outside of the framework of unions and so on, and sabotage and so on. He also wrote that this bombing showed the true measure of the strength of the workers' struggles. So it showed like the strength of the movement, because such a radical and violent thing as a bombing was needed to stop the movement, but then also the weakness, because this terrorist attack actually worked to stop. The proletariat was like completely disoriented, and basically they stopped rioting after the Piazza Fontana bombing.
Another moment that kind of defined the years of lead in Italy was the kidnapping and murder of Aldo Moro. So how did Sanguinetti view this event? This was the kidnapping by the Red Brigade.
Yes. So maybe just quickly about who is Aldo Moro.
Yes.
So he was a very distinguished politician from the Democrazia Cristiana, so the Christian Democracy Party. He served as a prime minister, I think, 5 times throughout the 60s and the 70s. He was very important because he started a series of social reforms, among them, for example, compulsory middle school education for all children. So I think it's for children between the ages of 11 and 14. He also wanted Italy to have an independent foreign policy. He established relations, like he had relations with countries such as Libya, Algeria, Egypt, and also he had relations, I think, with the Palestinian PLP. What is it?
PFLP.
PFLP, yes. And he, what is very important, he famously wanted to kind of embrace the idea of the historical compromise, which was, so the historical compromise was an idea proposed by Enrico Berlinguer from the Communist Party of Italy as a kind of, shouldn't maybe be called coalition, but some kind of accommodation between the Christian democracy and the communists in order to save the country in this very, very stressful time for Italy. So this was proposed by Berlinguer, and Aldo Moro wanted to accept this, which is exactly what actually Sanguinetti proposed
Right.
in the truthful report as the best tactics to save capitalism. But many other people in power, unlike Moro, did not agree with this. So he was kidnapped on March 16, 1978 in Via Fani by the Red Brigades. The official story was that this kidnapping was done by 4 to 5 members, I think, of the Red Brigades. Later, when this parliamentary commission was established to find out the truth about the kidnapping, it was confirmed. So this was already sometimes in the 2000s because his family insisted very much for the truth to come out. And yes, he was kept for 55 days, and later, and he was killed. So his body was found in a car in Rome. So when this commission was established, they found out that probably more than 20 people were involved in this kidnapping, because apparently he was, so 5 cops within, I think, like 2 to 3 minutes, 5 cops who were like following him. So they were in like 2 cars, him and other, I think, 4 to 5 cops. So within 2 to 3 minutes, these 5 cops were killed, and he did not have a scratch. And it was later confirmed that it was around 20 people that actually participated in this kidnapping, and that the Brigate Rosse were not only infiltrated by Italian secret services, but probably also by British, French, and maybe also other. So what did Sanguinetti say about it? He said in the book that he actually kind of predicted this event, because in April 1977 there was this there was the kidnapping of the son of the socialist politician Francesco De Martino, and in a text that he published this year, like at that time, Sanguinetti says that this is kind of a rehearsal for something bigger to happen, like from maybe like a bigger kidnapping. And so it did happen with the kidnapping of Aldo Moro next year. So what did he say? He said that basically it's obvious that the Brigate Rosse did not have the military and technical skill to do this kidnapping, which like now when we know like the context of it seems obvious, but when he said this, a lot of people were very, very upset.
Sure, yeah.
Many on the left thought that the Red Brigades were wrong, that this kidnapping was very wrong, but they still considered them comrades. Like one person, for example, wrote, "They are comrades who make mistakes, but they're still comrades." While Sanguinetti thought that basically the Brigate Rosse were like a prolonged armed arm of the state. I don't know how to maybe say it better, like armed of the state, basically.
Yeah.
So why did he suspect that the Brigate Rosse were infiltrated? Also, so not because he thought that they didn't have the necessary military skill to do this kidnapping, but also he wrote how many figures inside of Italy, also inside of the Democrazia Cristiana party and also outside of Italy were interested in Moro being killed. And another indication for him was that the authorities never wanted to negotiate with the Brigate Rosse. So for him, this was an indication that they didn't want to save him. Another indication was the fact that they apparently hired some kind of psychic and parapsychologist or something like this to find Moro. So these two people were like standing there, yeah, he's maybe in this house next to the river, and then the police would go there to find him, and it was like this whole bizarre thing. And so for him, this like unseriousness in the investigation and the fact that they didn't find him in the end was an indication or a proof that they actually did not want to find him.
I mean, fair enough. If you have like a extremely important politician who gets disappeared and held hostage,
And you hire a psychic.
you hire a bunch of psychics, it's clear that those in charge don't really care that much. I mean, that's either like, you know, in the movies, like, we're all out of options. We have to turn to the psychic. I don't believe in that mumbo jumbo. Maybe you. No, like this is, they went straight for the psychic.
Yeah.
What I found out in his archive is that apparently he did get some information about this kidnapping, and interestingly from a German anarchist with the name Susanne Mordhorst. So I found like their correspondence and also her police file, like of the German police. So she was wanted by the German police because they suspected that she was the connection between the German RAF and the Brigate Rosse and similar other groups all across Europe. I don't know if this was true.
RAF being Red Army Faction.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Just wanna
Yeah, exactly.
clarify.
Yeah, sorry. And she managed not to be arrested in Germany because she like quickly got married to an Italian, so they could not give her to Germany.
Mhm.
This is also one thing that I wanted to ask him, like, is she still alive? Who is she? What kind of information she actually gave him? But yes.
So she wrote to him saying that she thought that this was like an op.
No, she did not say this. Like in the letters that I read between them, and like when he mentions her in letters to others, he just writes about her and says that she gave him some information.
Uh-huh.
I don't know exactly what. Apparently, in the information that came out, so after this parliamentary investigation, there was a mention that there were some German women involved in this whole. I mean, this whole kidnapping of Aldo Moro is an incredibly complicated story with a million of characters. Like apparently the 'Ndrangheta was also involved. Some Vatican bishops were involved. Like, I don't know. It's very, very complicated.
KGB, Libya.
Yeah, maybe also Soviet secret services. Like, it's a whole thing, and also like some German woman with German accent was apparently somehow involved. I don't know if this is. I mean, probably this is not Susanne Mordhorst, but I don't know. I really don't know. I was intrigued by this character.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find more about it. Like the police file that I found is very, very long and describes how she actually is like connection between all of these groups. But yeah, I could not verify this. Maybe I would ask Mustafa Kayati if he knows something about her or whoever is still alive. And like one important point in relation to this that he makes is that the international proletariat needs to pay close attention to the class struggle in Italy because it's obvious that world intelligence services are experimenting like new strategies in this moment in Italy. So that everybody needs to pay attention to the class struggle in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and to remind people, he's saying this before Gladio as a thing was revealed.
Yeah. So Italy is kind of unique among other countries because many countries had a radical 68 movement, but Italy also had a 77 movement, which in Italy, from what I understand, is even more kind of important historically than the 68 movement. So what was it and what did Sanguinetti think about it?
So the Movimento 77 was like a spontaneous political and cultural movement. So that obviously happened in 1977, as the name says. It was a very heterogeneous, like politically heterogeneous movement. Also the same as the movement of 68 and 69 in Italy. It was outside of the framework for political parties and unions. It had a lot of different tendencies. One important group was Lotta Continua. Another one was Autonomia movement, which had also different fractions inside of it. One fraction was, for example, Autonomia Operaia, which was a post-operaist group. Then there was Autonomia Creativa, Autonomia Diffusa, which was kind of group that insisted on like decentralization and horizontal organization and such. And then there was also Autonomia Armata, which insisted on armed struggle. There were also many like urban guerrilla groups, like armed groups. For example, the mentioned Brigate Rosse, Prima Linea, Nuclei Armati Proletari, and many others.
I always like a group that has nuclei in their name.
Yeah. So one important novelty of this movement, unlike the one in 78, 79, was that they had a big feminist component inside of it. So, for example, Lotta Feminista group started in this period. So some of these groups existed before and existed later. Some were only active during this year.
Lotta Feminista were the people who started the whole wages for housework international movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the whole thing started like at the beginning of the year in Bologna when Luciano Lama, he was a member of the union CGIL. So he came to the university in Bologna to give a speech to the autonomy with the point basically being that they should all join the Communist Party. And everybody was very mad. The police basically needed to save his ass. And then like riots started. The whole city was occupied for 3 days. I think one rioter was killed. And then after this, like a whole series of riots across Italy started and were happening throughout the year. So what did Sanguinetti say about it? So the Rimedio Tutto book was basically what he wanted to say to the youth that was active in the movement at that moment. But then he didn't publish it. But this is what was his initial intention. So at that moment, he was like extremely optimistic. He wrote how capitalism never had more enemies in Italy, not only among the leftists, but also inside of the state. So because the politicians were so incompetent, they were also, in a way, enemies of capitalism in that moment. He wrote that the Communist Party clearly aligned itself with the goal of saving capitalism and that the success of this autonomous movement depended on them not having any illusions about it. He considered the student movement and groups such as Lotta Continua as completely alienated from the workers' struggles because they were, in his opinion, looking for their models in the failed revolutions in Russia, China, and Cuba. He only praised, so the only group that he liked were the Metropolitan Indians, Indiani Metropolitani.
The what now?
Indiani Metropolitani was the name. So they were part of the Autonomia Creativa. They were like a very, very spontaneous urban group. He liked them because he thought that they fought with rigor and success and violence against any kind of leadership, and also because they immediately dissolved after the movement died and did not argue with Lotta Continua or the Autonomia over the corpse of the movement, as he said. He also wanted to publish a book with them. He wrote to them let's make this book of pictures of graffiti, and then what we earn with this book we can just drink with this money. And in my opinion, the most important part of what he wrote about this movement was his critique of the, as he calls it, ideologia lotarmatista, so the armed strugglist ideology of the armed groups.
Well, tell us more about his critique.
Yeah, so he wrote that, so from this perspective of...
How do you call it? So the armed struggle ideology, right, of the Italian...
Let's say armed strugglist ideology, let's say. Ideologia lotarmatista. So so from the perspective of the left, he says that terrorism historically never had any revolutionary efficiency, except in cases where any kind of other subversive activity was impossible because of repression. But even then, the revolutionary efficiency of terrorism was limited in his idea. So one thing that he criticizes from this ideology is their fetishizing of weapons. So he says that the fetish of weapons is also a kind of commodity fetish, basically. And his opinion was that when the time comes, there will be no lack of weapons. The weapons will be seized from the police, from the army, from the bourgeoisie.
Not a popular position in the U.S., I'd imagine.
And he also thought that terrorist tactics allowed the state to have this narrative of opposed extremes, where the state takes the position of like a reasonable protector of public peace. And one important thing that he wrote is that such groups as Brigate Rosse or NAP or Prima Linea offered like wide possibilities for the police to infiltrate them because of their like ideology of secrecy and violence. So because they were organized like with a secret nucleus, so people who were giving orders were not necessarily, the people who were taking orders were not necessarily aware of who exactly was giving the orders. So there was no open discussion in these groups, but there was like a strong hierarchy who gives orders and who takes orders. And this like hierarchical organization and this secrecy made it very possible for these groups to be infiltrated.
But when he's talking about armed struggleism, and this is primarily, these are like these urban guerrilla groups, right? They're small.
Yeah.
Like this isn't like, I don't know. There isn't like a peasant insurgency going on in Italy at this time that he's critiquing as well or something. It's just this kind of 70s urban guerrilla groups.
Yeah, he's critiquing
kidnapping, bombing, doing some kind of assassinations.
Yeah, so he's not against armed struggle.
Right.
This critique only applies to these specific like urban guerrilla groups, such as Brigate Rosse. And this is what actually one of the points is that in his opinion, these groups made it possible for the state to condemn any kind of violent organizing. So he was not against every kind of violence, but because these groups presented themselves as the only and most radical and total opposition to capitalism, like this narrative made it possible that the state gives this idea that the state is attacking them, but actually they are concealing and distorting like the real worker struggles and any kind of other kind of violent opposition to capitalism. So he emphasizes that these kind of groups were completely divided from the actual worker struggles and at the same time completely dependent on all of the appearances of the society of the spectacle. So they are, in his opinion, a product of the society of the spectacle and one of its most efficient tools. He considered that the revolutionary struggle needs to happen in the open, that secrecy and violence is the mark of the bourgeois and Stalinist counter-revolution, and that only the truth is revolutionary, and that the proletariat needs to struggle in the open. He said that it will for sure not be the militants to make the revolution, and also for sure not the intelligence services and the Stalinist police to stop it.
Yeah, we recently talked about the movie One Battle After Another. We kind of thought that it maybe offered maybe a somewhat similar critique to this one.
Yeah, good point, actually.
Yeah.
Why do you think this?
Well, why do I think that? I don't know. We said it in the... Did you listen to our episode?
Yes, I did.
It's like a very long episode. I mean, I don't know. To me, like the whole... I thought that the first part of the film was the kind of critiqued by the whole like next 2 hours of the film, and that there was this kind of opposition of these kind of the fetishistic relationship to the armed struggle of the French 75, and then which was contrasted with the kind of more the actual movement of the migrant workers, which had a completely different kind of structure and feeling to it, and that was a kind of an actual movement, it seemed.
Yeah.
The kind of the vanguard armed struggle group was very flashy, very spectacular, but in the end, when it was attacked by the state, it immediately was defeated. But the movement that was contrasted to that had a very vibrant structure to it that enabled it to, when it's attacked, to kind of become even more effective in some sense. So I thought that the movie made that point.
Right,
Yes,
it included kind of a broad section of society.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the French 75 obviously had a fetishistic relation to weapons. Like there was
like
an
literally,
obvious
yeah.
sexualization of weapons in that scene when, what's her name, Perfidia has sex with the cop. I think he fucks him with a gun, and then there is this whole these scenes when she's shooting while she's pregnant, and there is obviously this kind of fetishization of weapons. And then also when connected to the point that Sanguinetti made, when the states uses these groups as kind of way to actually attack the proletariat. When they come to search for the Leonardo DiCaprio figure, Pat, or what's his name, when he's already living in the Beckton Cross, so we see how their search for him actually turns into a total repression of the people who are working there in the factory. Like they are the ones actually who get attacked and terrorized by the police while the police is searching for him.
Yeah.
So it has a bad consequences for the entirety of the proletariat. When the state tries to suppress these groups.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would also say any form of struggle would have consequences similar to that. No.
Yeah, but I think the point of his critique is that they are divided from the struggle and have this spectacular element to them, but then there are consequences for the proletariat.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this kind of critique of specifically, especially these urban guerrilla groups of the 60s and 70s exist and kind of have similar arguments to Sanguinetti's. I mean, just that I've seen over the years. It's but what I was really interested in this discussion, and something I really didn't know much about, was how he talked about Gladio and terrorism specifically, because again, Sanguinetti is a figure that I hadn't really heard much about until you talked to you about him, and admittedly, my exposure to situationism has largely been, Debord and the student life, Jesus Christ, Mustafa Khayati, yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting to me to actually learn a little bit more about it because you get this kind of, if you don't like reading kind of French philosophy, it can be kind of somewhat, or philosophy in general. I don't know. Debord can be a lot to deal with, especially if you read him when you're young, which is.
The first time when I read Society of the Spectacle, I didn't understand anything.
No, I was like, I don't get what the fuck this is all about. I don't understand why so many people like this.
I liked it, but I didn't know why.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that was the case for a lot of people. You know what I mean? I think it was wow, you should read, some situationist stuff. It does. It sounds cool. It sounds fun to read. But this was a whole other angle I didn't know about, and it does actually very well tie into our Tenepod stuff. And there's nobody better to talk to about it than you, because I mean, there's not that many people who have dug through those archives.
I mean, there are people who went through.
I didn't say none. I said there are not many.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, not many.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this has been really great.
Yeah.
Thank you a lot.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome discussion. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Ray here. I had a dream, and it was that I won't be working in call centers anymore. And you can help that dream become a reality by going to patreon.com and subscribing. And if you're German, or Austrian, or Anti-Deutsch, whatever you people call yourselves these days, doesn't really matter. The fact is, your grandfather killed my grandfather. He marched down the street in my hometown, renamed the square fucking Adolf Hitler Square. You think I'm kidding? All of this actually happened. And you should feel bad about it. I don't care if you were born in 97 or wherever you were born. This is not normal behavior, okay? You're not normal. I know people from all of the continents, no one thinks you're normal. But there's good news for you. We made a special tier just for you so you can pay 10 times as much as a normal person would. It won't make you normal, but it will make you feel better. Okay, thanks. Bye.